go ahead and get started, specifically talking about this one. So I'm going to stop sharing Lisa's screen and I'm going to start sharing my screen for the Q&A. So there we've got that, but I'm going to stop sharing because I want to be able to take a moment and check in with you. So welcome to you now that I can see a couple of faces. I am going to ask if you feel comfortable, if you wouldn't mind showing your video, because it's kind of hard to spend an hour talking to black rectangles. So if you don't mind doing that, I would be very grateful. It is a Q&A, so like I said, we are going to be pretty informal. If you want to unmute and ask me a question, or if you want to drop a question in the chat, any of those are okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. There were some people who submitted questions ahead of time, and we can start with those, or I don't know if those people who submitted questions are people here. So I hate to answer a question and the person not be here on the call, and there be people here on the call with questions that maybe I don't get to answer. So let's start. What questions do you have about dementia and specifically about communication? So what are your questions about dementia and communication? I'm starting the recording again. So it's complicated because when we are in a situation where people are trying to adapt the way they've been communicating over time, so whether that's a mother and a daughter, whether that's spouses, when we're trying to change years of communication, whether that's me as a nurse who is used to delivering content in a really directive, specific kind of way, when it comes to the point that we need to adapt and change that, it's hard. Changing communication is really hard. So the first thing is take a deep breath and step back and really look at and think about, is what we're doing distressing for the person living with dementia? Because some of us are used to, I'm remembering, I worked with an attorney, and there was a couple that were both attorneys, and when his wife stopped negotiating, debating, discussing, explaining, he thought something terribly wrong was happening. And he thought that things were bad and we needed to, she was hiding something for him. So it's hard to kind of find those specific parameters within couples or relationships or things like that. So what I would say is to realize when it's getting to that point that it's becoming distressing. So part of what it is having a conversation, the goal of which is me being right, having a conversation, the goal of which is for me to get the person to understand and agree. That's when it gets to be really complicated. So if we've always discussed politics and we've always had these conversations, that's not really what I'm talking about. What I'm really talking about is if I try to convince the person. So say, for example, the person says, you never come to see me. And I say back, well, I'm here. I've been here every day this week. No, you don't. You never come to see me. Oh, Mom, I'm here. I took a picture of us with the newspaper every single day. See, there's Monday's newspaper, Tuesday's. If it's trying to convince and change and make that person get it or understand, then that kind of discussion really isn't effective. That kind of discussion really isn't, it just builds tension and distress. So I don't mean you can never have, I really like this singer. No, this one's always been better. That kind of conversation discussion, that's fine. It's just things where I try to convince the person I'm right, you're wrong, or I try to help the person understand. So I actually do have, of course, I've prepared some slides, and one of them actually talks a little, this is our beautiful new first slide, our mission, which is to improve the lives of all North Carolinians. Um, so this is kind of where we can start is telling the truth or not telling the truth. So one of the questions that was submitted ahead of time is, if the person has early dementia, how much do you tell them is going on with them? How much do you explain their diagnosis? How much do you try to get them to get it? So this is a great kind of place to start. I started with some questions because every situation I deal with is different, because every person living with dementia is different. It's not like we're measuring the impact of blood pressure medicine on, although that's unique as possible. That's not a very good example either. So I start with, does the person want the information? Is the person asking? Is the person saying, I think I'm going crazy. Something is wrong with my brain. What's wrong with my brain? Is the person seeking the information and asking? Is the person is worried? I think I've got a brain tumor. I can't keep up with anything. Am I going crazy like my aunt who wound up in that place? So you really kind of, is the person asking and worried? Do they want to know? If the person is asking and worried and they want to know, then I'm going to answer their questions in the way they're asking them. So I'm going to say, Mom, yeah, you're right. You are having some problems with the brain, way your brain works. It's getting harder for you. And the doctor said it could be dementia, but Mom, whatever it is, I love you. Whatever it is, we're in this together. Then we move into an I remember. I remember when I was in college and I had mono, and you came to the hospital every single day when I was in the hospital, and then you brought me home and you put me a cot in the living room because we didn't want my sister. So then we move into I remembers instead of don't you remember. So that idea of comforting the person who realizes, if you put your hand right here and you look at your self-awareness, some people get it. They realize I have a problem. Things are changing. And some people are like, you have a problem, you need to change. If the person is having the problem of, I have a problem, I need help, giving them those answers, supporting them through that is the way to go. On the other hand, if the person thinks it's your problem and you need to change, then the more you try to explain, and the more you try um, to convince them that they are the ones with the problem, they are making mistakes, then the more conflict we build up. The reason I worry about it is not because of this moment. The reason I worry about it is because of the emotional memories that we create through communication. So if I have a text is a great, text and email are great things. If I get an email from somebody or I get a text from somebody and it seems kind of abrupt and sharp and it kind of hurts my feelings, then the next time I get an email from that person, I kind of am like, I'm reluctant to open it. Are they going to be mean again? They probably didn't mean to be mean. They probably didn't mean to be, um, to hurt my feelings. It's just a communication. But I hold on to an emotional memory. And so then that impacts the way I interpret the next one. So, what we're trying to do is create emotional memories where people living with dementia feel like they've got people who are on their side, whatever that means for them. Like they've got people who are getting it, whatever that means to them. The other reason for telling the truth when it comes to diagnosis is, more and more those moments are happening earlier, and more those moments are happening when people can, um, be involved in the planning, when people can be involved in making priorities. And and in what's really important to them, and what they can live without. So, for example, if we're having a conversation about where we like to live, and the person says, I want to stay home, I've got it. You want to stay home. I don't promise, yes, you can stay home. I'm gonna give up my job and let my house go into foreclosure, move in with you and take care of the rest of your life. We don't do that. But I say, yeah, I understand you want to stay home. Home is where you're comfortable, where you're safe, where you really want to be. Home is where you want to be. What is it about home that you really hold on to and you love? What is it about home? Well, I love having my own kitchen. Well, that gives me a cue of when mom can't be by herself anymore, and I can't give up my job and put my house in foreclosure to go live with her. Then one of the things I need to look for is access to a kitchen, because that's something that makes a place feel like a home. And she says, you go to a hotel and you have to take what they do, and they always overcook things and they never are right. And so that's I make the promise that I'm gonna do my best to make sure you always have access to a kitchen. So that's the importance of kind of having those early conversations and communications. So I know there were some questions about that, and that kind of impacts and influences some of the other questions that might come up. So one of the other questions that came up in the question and answer was, how do you know if the person is understanding you? And I love this question for a couple of reasons. I love this question because it identifies that communication is about expression and about understanding. And for that really to work, those two pieces need to connect. So for communication to work, there's going to be questions and there's going to be responses. You're going to give information and you're going to receive information. Part of what's really often confusing about dementia is we think about it at, we don't realize how many different types of everything there are. So when we think about communication, there's real conversation and then there's chit chat. And part of what gets really confusing about dementia is often people hold on to the ability to chit chat, but they lose the ability to really have deep, meaningful conversation, or really to say something new, or to say something that's specific. So what happens is, I'm talking to, I'm the daughter and I'm talking with my father on the phone. I say, hey, Dad, how's it going? He says, oh, fine, doing great. And I say, well, are you taking care of your med? Oh, yeah, I'm taking my medications. I've always taken my medication. Well, that's really good. Are you eating okay? Oh, yeah, I eat everything you leave for me. All right, Dad, well, I'm gonna be there later on today. Okay, I love you. Love you, bye. And when I get there, he hasn't taken the medications. All of the food I left is gone. And I feel like Dad was misleading me or Dad was lying to me. When the truth is, Dad is just doing chit chat. And for people living with dementia, those automatic, how are you? Fine. But that's true for us as well, right? If someone asks you, how are you? Your automatic answer is fine. If someone asks you, um, if someone says thank you, your automatic is you're welcome. If someone says good morning, your automatic is good morning. So those aren't really, those are just chit-chatty kinds of things. So people living with dementia, because of the rhythm, because they've done it forever, those pieces are held on to. And those chit-chatty kinds of things, those become permanent. So they can often chit chat when there isn't a lot of meaning. So how do you figure out what is chit chat and what is not chit chat? Well, I do a couple of things. I might ask somebody, I might say, using the same facial expression, using the same cadence, I might say, so Jenny, are you cold? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. Jenny says no. I say, Jenny, are you hot? Okay, so now I know Jenny was able, she's not cold, she's kind of hot. So she's able to distinguish. So what I want you to do this time is, Jenny, just every time I ask you a question, just give me the thumbs down, okay? Right. So Jenny, are you hot? Jenny, are you cold? Jenny, are you comfortable? Okay, so now I know what I'm getting an automatic no from Jenny. And so it may not have meaning. It probably does, it's not specific, it's just a generic automatic. And probably the reason why Jenny is giving me that automatic no is because Jenny isn't hearing, Jenny, are you cold? Are you hot? Are you comfortable? What Jenny is hearing is, Jenny, yada dada 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 dada. And the answer to yada dada 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 when I don't understand and I know it's a question is, nah, that doesn't sound good. Jenny, yada dada 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 dada. Mm-mm. Jenny, yada dada 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 dada. And she still does it. So everything is going to be the automatic no. So now I'm realizing either probably Jenny is hearing the cadence of the question, because that's another thing that's preserved is knowing when it's a question, because our voice goes up. And so knowing it's a question, knowing that there's a pause, so that rhythm of speech, knowing it's a question, knowing it's her turn, not understanding the question. And so the answer is no. Now, on the other hand, if Jenny and I are best friends and everything I ever come up with is fun and wonderful and exciting, and I say, Jenny, ya da 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 da, and Jenny goes, yeah. And then I take her in the bathroom and try to pull her pants down, because I'm now not just her friend, I'm her care partner. Jenny's now going, what? Yeah, that's not right. That doesn't make sense. And so thinking about those automatic no's might be automatic yeses. So how do you figure it out? You can figure out by asking some of those questions and seeing. You can figure out by there, Dr. Dan Coffer, who was a wonderful neurologist, is affiliated with UNC, a wonderful partner and friend with Dementia Alliance of North Carolina for many years, would ask what he called his red pajamas questions. His red pajama question. He would say, so if Marie can nod at me, so just keep nodding, Marie. Okay. So if I say to Marie, so Marie, are you taking your medication? So Marie, are you sleeping okay? And Marie, you're not driving anymore, are you? So go do this, Marie. Now you're not driving anymore, are you? Because now I'm using visual cueing. So now what Marie is responding to is not just the question, but what? My visual cueing of what the right answer is. So now I go, Marie, you're not driving anymore, are you? I go, Marie, am I wearing red pajamas? Yeah. And so now I know that Marie is not responding to the words, she's responding to my visual cue. The other thing I can do to kind of screen to kind of see if people can understand is I can go, Ashley, Ashley, put your hand on your head. Okay, so now I know Ashley is what? She's hearing me, and put your hands right here, because this is where understanding is. She's hearing me and she's understanding my language. So that's one of the screens that I use to kind of see if people are understanding those words that I'm using. It can be kind of helpful to help figure that out. So we're about halfway through our time. I'm going to pause here, and I am going to see if there are any questions. And I'm also going to mention that I do have a few of these slides. I will send these after we finish. I never know why exactly we're going to wind up talking about this during these Q&A sessions. I'll send these to Lisa. Lisa will send these out, and you will have my email on there. So if you've got a really quick question, you can email me. Probably a better thing to do is to reach out to Lisa with your questions, and she can answer them, connect you with some resource. Forward those to me if that is what needs to happen. So cool. So I am gonna pause for a minute, see if there are any questions. And you can unmute and ask, or you can drop them in the chat. Otherwise, I've got about 40 hours of talks. I can keep going from now until this time next week if y'all want to. Well,
Can you hear
I
me?
actually can't. I've got another call at 10. So, yes, Steve.
Um, the first lady, I think it was Sarah, maybe. Anyway, she mentioned 10 something or others that I'd never heard of. I'm very new to this, okay, with my girlfriend, and it's beginning, and we're having some issues. But anyway, there were 10 something or others that she mentioned I'd never heard of.
Yeah, there's a pretty well known, I think it's done by the Alzheimer's Association. You can usually find it through many of their chapters, and it's called the 10 Absolutes of Caregiving. And it just says, instead of this, try this. I had one question about one of those, so I'll share that screen. One of the questions that I was asked specifically was about one of their things is never command instead of ask or model. And what's the difference? What does it mean to ask or model? And the command or demand obviously means telling the person what to do, and saying, Steve, stop, um, stop. I can't think of what I would tell Steve to stop. Steve, stop tearing up the newspaper. I haven't read it yet. You always fold it the wrong way. Stop doing that. That's a demand or a command. Instead, the ask or the model would be more something like, hey, Steve, I was looking forward to reading the newspaper. Would you mind letting me look at it before you tear out the articles? And if not, it may be simpler and easier and cheaper and less distressing to go buy my own newspaper if there's something I want to look at and read, and just not have the discussion. So it's a well-known, it's easy to find. But when you're thinking about when you're getting started, there are some good resources out there. Dementia Alliance has a YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and you just search under Dementia Alliance of North Carolina, um, that we have videos on there that are kind of starter videos. And there's some about communication, there's some about COVID, there's some about how to ask people for things, how to deal with complicated questions. So there are a lot of little clips, some about sleep, some about medications. There are a lot of little short little 10-15 minute videos on there that you can go and look at for a starter. The other place I would really encourage you to reach out to um, for getting started are some of our online support groups, because that's a place where you think support group and you think, sitting on the floor on beanbag chairs, burning incense, singing kumbaya, everybody kind of crying and one-upping each other with how bad life is. And I would not have been a support group leader since the 90s if that was what was going on, because that's really not my personality. That doesn't work for me. So support groups are places where you go to talk and have conversations with people who get it, people who understand what you're going through because they're going through it. But it's also the best place often to go for resources, to go for information. So reach out to one of our online support groups, and that's another wonderful place to go for legitimate information. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there that is misleading and inaccurate, and it's kind of like the plus minus of the internet is anybody can have an opinion, anybody can have an opinion. So there are lots of really wonderful, this is what I tried and it helped kind of things, but there's also a bunch of really scary stuff out there. I found one day, hang your parent up by their heels in the corner and let all the blood drain to their head and their brain will work better. Well, no, don't. just no, don't. But people can say anything they want to say, but going to reputable, you're in a good place to get started, Steve. So, we welcome you to our community. Stay in touch with us. Give a phone call to Dementia Alliance and talk to Dee Dee, who's the Dementia Navigator. Connect with our community, connect with the support group, because we weren't really I'm a nurse. I can say we weren't really educated to deal with dementia. I'm a nurse. I have a degree from UNC Chapel Hill, Clemson University, and Duke, and I didn't leave any of those programs really having what I needed to be a good care partner with somebody living with dementia. I know a lot of stuff, but I needed to supplement that with experience and with practice and with learning from people who've done it. So you're in the right place, Steve. So
Thank you.
thanks for asking that.
Okay, thank you.
So what are any other questions, or do you want me to pull up one of the other questions from the list that were submitted ahead of time? You can drop it into the chat. If you're looking for the chat, I know one person found the chat. Let me see. Yeah, so um, there's a chat. You can put a little comment in that, or you can unmute and you can just ask me, or I can go to some of the other things that I had prepared.
I have a question.
Hi, Mary.
What? So my father's been diagnosed with dementia, and I live a couple of hours away from them. I'm just trying to kind of help support my mom, and I think she's in a lot of denial about it. So, trying to approach that gently in a manner that's respectful, but also helpful in a way. So, what are some like logistical things that can be done as far as routines and things like that that can be established that help somebody with dementia get through the day in an easier manner? Like, here's your medicine, here's your clothes, here's, we take our bath and then we put our clothes on. Like things like, are there things like that that are helpful logistically that will eliminate some of the hard communications that happen when you have an argument over, I don't want to take a bath, or I already took one? Or are there things like logistical things like that people could do?
Yeah, so there were several good questions in there, and one of them was um, kind of how do we set up a system and set up a pattern. And so that is a good thing to do. And you notice I'm kind of stuttering a little bit. I call it flexible structure. One of things that's really helpful for people living with dementia is for the day to have a pattern, for the day to be kind of predictable. But the problem is they can't often hold on to that pattern or predictability in their brain. But sometimes what they can do is hold on to that pattern and predictability in their body. So what I mean by that is people can get used to patterns of movement. So if I have a pattern of y'all have motor patterns, right? What's the one of the first things you do every time you get in the car?
Seatbelt.
Seatbelt. And why do you do your seatbelt every time you get in the car?
Muscle memory.
It's muscle memory. So if we can kind of get some of those muscle memory things in place. So for example, if I take medications and my medications are okay to be taken with food, and so I get into this pattern of every time I have a meal, I take a medicine, then I can kind of get used to that pattern. So then that becomes normal or next. That becomes the next thing. So I sit down and I have my medicine and then I have my food. So maybe what that means to maybe I don't need food medicine 3 times a day, but to get the pattern, I kind of do. So maybe you split up my vitamin and my this and my that. So that becomes my pattern. So it's flexible structure. So we do the same kinds of things in the same kinds of places, um, But within that, there's got to be the understanding that sometimes that isn't enough, and sometimes that doesn't work. So the other piece of structure that might be helpful, um, might be thinking about what's the person's usual routine. So the usual routine might come from, um, the recent, what I've been doing up until the past year. That might be the routine, but the other routine might go back into my life. So if the person is remembering when I was raising my children, my routine was probably quite different than now that I'm retired. So looking at, or when I was a young child, what was my routine then? So thinking about what might some of those routines be. So for example, if showers are fairly new inventions on a daily basis, right? So if I'm 90 and I don't remember taking a shower every day, for me, getting cleaned up might be standing in front of a sink doing a sponge bath. The goal is to get cleaned, not to be dunked or sprinkled. So we take away some of that argument. So the goal is to be clean. So every morning I stand in front of, or every night, whatever seems to be a better pattern for me, I stand in front of the sink and I wash off. That's good enough. A lot of older people don't need a lot of soap on their skin. It depletes the oils, it makes their skin more vulnerable. Americans might be almost too clean for health, in truth. Um, so we kind of take some flexibility with that. That the goal is to be clean, whatever that means. Now, in North Carolina, if you're going to be outside in July, you need to wipe off, because it's July in North Carolina. In North Carolina in February, and you don't, maybe not so much. So it's really kind of finding what does that mean in this situation. So finding those kind of pieces. The other piece I would add for you, Marie, is find other ways to try to find other ways to get the work done. And what I mean by that is we as adults tend to let words do most of the work. So, I look at Marie and I say, Marie, what I want you to do is put your hand on your head. So go ahead and put your hand on your head. Nice job, Marie. Good job putting your hand on your head. And they're just words and words and so many words. Instead, I can go, Marie, hey, nice. And so if I can do more with visual cueing, if I can do more with, in the morning when he goes in the bathroom, his toothbrush is out with toothpaste on it. So you see a toothbrush with toothpaste on it, what's kind of the next thing to do? Is brush your teeth. And when his wife goes in, the toothpaste doesn't have toothbrush paste on it. The toothbrush doesn't have toothpaste on it. Check, that's been done. So those visual kinds of reminders versus, because especially with somebody we love and we trust, those kind of verbal reminders often feel like nagging. And so it kind of feels like, did you brush your teeth? Now you need to, you need to brush your teeth. You need to brush, that it's good for your heart to brush your teeth. I mean, and it just, plus when it's the 49th time, when we do the same thing and it doesn't work, we often keep doing it and we keep doing it, we keep doing it. And particularly for women, so Steve is off, yeah, Steve is still there. Steve is off the hook for this one. But particularly for women, what tends to happen is our voices get higher and higher pitched. And it's not because we're trying to nag, it's because we're straining to communicate. And so our pitch goes up and it starts to sound more like, and then people, it gets back to that emotional memory of people not liking us, not wanting to be with us as much anymore. So was a little bit of that helpful in there, Marie? The other thing I mentioned, kind of the beginning, your mom, it's new, trying to help. Um, I am a gerontological nurse practitioner. I, up until COVID, traveled all over the country in different parts of the world talking about stuff. People paid me for my opinions and for my words of wisdom. And my mother was on a medication that was making her constipated. And I said, Mom, maybe you want to drink more water and eat more fiber. And she was still constipated. And I said, Mom, because she didn't drink more water and eat more fiber. And I said, Mom, maybe you want to drink more water and eat more fiber. And she was still constipated. Mom, maybe would you try drinking more water and eating more fiber? We went to see the neurologist. I'm so constipated. Well, Miss Bunn, maybe you want to try eating more fiber and drinking more water. My mother wrote it down. So sometimes you just can't be the one. So now I have a good friend who's an occupational therapist. Now, when I want my mom to do something or not to do something, I say, so Mom, Tipa doesn't think it's a good idea for you to have that towel there on your floor. Oh, Tipa doesn't think, well, let me move it. Then I call Tipa and say, by the way, you didn't think having a towel on the floor was a good idea for my mom. And she says, you got it. So it's just kind of about softening things, about letting go of confrontation, letting go of being right. I see a couple of things coming up in the chat, and I want to go back and and check on a couple of these. Published articles by Dr. Coffer. So yes, Dr. Coffer published a lot, specifically about kind of the diagnosis of dementia, about specifically about some of the more complicated, like Lewy body, or not complicated, more less understood dementias, like Lewy body, frontal temporal lobe dementia. That was really kind of his driving focus. So yes, he's published a number of articles, not about communication. That was just kind of a little tip he slipped into a talk one day, and into his clinical practice. But yes, he's very well published. The next thing in the chat I see is, are there ways who can still read a daily checklist that could be verified by the. Okay, so that sounds really good. And that I wish that I wish, so it gives you a chance, but the reality is there's so much that happens between I look at my schedule and my schedule says, because part of what happens, particularly with Alzheimer's disease, is people have trouble hanging on to things, to new information. So what happens is there's a new piece of information that says, get the newspaper. So I look at my list and it says, go get the newspaper. So I read, go get the newspaper. And then I head to the door and I notice that it's raining. So then I go back in and I get my jacket. And when I get my jacket, then I notice that my hat is in the wrong place. So I go to take my hat and put it away. And so it kind of, then by the time I get, the newspaper has fallen off the list. So it's hard to make those kinds of things work because they're linear and people living with dementia aren't. So there's, reading is one thing, holding on to is another thing. Now, having said that, give it a try. I would, if I were going to try, I would keep it really simple. I would keep it really simple with just the most important things. I would keep it really simple in a place where the person sees it where they need to see it. So get the newspaper might need to be on the door. But the other challenge is the person sees get the newspaper and then they go out there and the newspaper isn't there. And the newspaper isn't there because they've already gotten the newspaper. But then they call the newspaper and say the newspaper wasn't delivered to, and it can get to be really complicated. So maybe think about it. Maybe think about some of those things that might be worth trying. The best thing I found for that is on a video chat is to do it together. So we FaceTime and I call and I FaceTime first time in the morning and I said, good morning. While I'm on the phone, let's go ahead and get in the newspaper. I'll go with you. So we go to get the newspaper virtually and come back. That seems to work pretty well. And I don't want to, because those kinds of things work incredibly well in normal aging. Those things tend to work incredibly well for someone who's got what's called mild cognitive impairment, which is kind of an in between that sometimes, most of the time, progresses to dementia, but sometimes stabilizes, where people can get new stuff in. It just takes an awful lot of practice and trial. Um, so I don't want to say don't try it. I would love for you to give it some tries and then pass on to us what works and what doesn't work. The kinds of things I've seen work. I had was working on a project with Duke where we were working with queuing for mouth care, like oral care. And I had a family who every Sunday evening taped dental floss sticks on the mirror. And by the next Sunday night, usually 5 or 6 of them were gone. And so we had a sense the person was flossing more than they were without that visual cue. So think more along the lines of visual cue rather than list. Think along the lines of what can we do together, except for those normal aging, mild cognitive impairment kinds of people. I think there was another, well, maybe that was it in the, I think that was it in the chat, published articles, and then the one for Chris. So we have about 10 minutes left. Like I said, I can talk for 40 hours, so I can keep talking, but I do want to pause and see if there are some other questions that this conversation has triggered.
Steve again.
Hi, Steve.
Um, I guess one of the things early on is the denial thing. How do you, because I'm sitting here, I'm a former alcoholic, so I went to AA, and the group thing is great, but I don't like what we're doing now, because I don't think anybody likes Zoom. You like that interpersonal interaction. But anyway, how do I get the person, because I'm listening to all this and I'm thinking, okay, if I can just get her kind of like a team, we're a team, let's work on this together. And some of these tools you're bringing up, get her to embrace them. But it's not me. That's like what you say. She'll go pay somebody. People, it's all my life. They'll go pay somebody to get the same advice I gave them. And, then they'll do it like you brought up. So I guess, how do you motivate them to acknowledge where they are? Because it's just beginning at MCI, between MCI and dementia, I would say right now. So I don't know how, how do you get this person to sort of buy into what we're talking about?
Yeah, so that's another great question. It kind of ties in with some of the other questions that were submitted. There's actually a condition. It's called acquisitive. I mean, I can't say it out without seeing it in front of me. But what it means is people don't get their condition. So it's denial is different than not having the physical chemical ability to understand. And it's complicated because we're talking about brain functions, but from this part of your brain, this frontal lobe is where we have the ability to, so everybody do this, put your hand up like this. So this is my perception of myself. This is my um, ability to see myself clearly. So I'm in a situation, so let's say driving. I'm in a situation and I need to drive to Chapel Hill and pick up my son because he's finished school for the semester. And I go, I've got that. I can do this. Not a problem. Or I look in the mirror and it's driving to Oregon and being there by Thursday, and I'm going, I need help. I can't do that by myself. So is this insight into ability is a frontal lobe function. The problem with people living with dementia is about half of them early on lose that ability. So it's not really denial. It's not emotional protection. It's a cognitive inability. So I'm gonna show y'all a photograph. So take a deep breath, because this is a photograph of real brain tissue. It's not bloody and gory, but it's their brains. So I'm going to show you a picture of these brains. So if you look at these brains, so this is actually this front part of the brain. And what you notice up here is the normal healthy frontal lobe. And you see, all of this beautiful gray matter and all of this beautiful white matter that helps pull everything together, put it together and understand. And this is the brain. Now, this is not where your girlfriend is, your partner is, because she's early. This is at the end, but this is where it winds up. And you can see all of those changes in that connection and all of those changes in storage. To look at it a different way, these are chemical changes in the brain. So red is where work is happening, glucose is being metabolized. The purple is fluid, is where the tissue is resting. So, for example, this is that frontal lobe in a healthy person working on a problem. So it's nice and red. That person is taking in lots of information, looking at options, trying to come up with solutions, being creative, being flexible and adaptive. Red is where it's working. And if you look at, this is the person, not in MCI, but in early dementia. This is the person in early Alzheimer's disease, specifically Alzheimer's type dementia. And you can see right away that they're not able to use logic and reason and creativity to problem solve and come up with answers. What they're using instead is this part of their brain. And this part of their brain is much more primitive. This is the hippocampus. And it's that fight, fright, flight, and not hippocampus, it's the amygdala. It's the amygdala. This is the hippocampus up here. So this is the fight, fright, flight amygdala. So they're using that panic. Oh my God, I've got to figure this out. What am I going to do? This is dangerous. It's risky. I've got to do it. I've got to do it. I've got to do it. So for the person who doesn't have dementia, this is what they're mainly using. This is just keeping them aware that there's something they're supposed to be focused on and working on. For the person in early dementia, early Alzheimer's disease, this is not carrying the load. What's carrying the load is panic and discomfort. So for people with MCI, for people with dementia of all types, having that insight is not something we can really push. I can't use logic and reason. I can't show I could show, but it's likely to not be very effective. If I show your family members these slides, they're not going to get. So what does that have to do with me? If I show the slides to somebody with anxiety or depression, they can look at those slides and, I mean, slides of brains with people with anxiety or depression, they can look at the slides and they can say, wow, my brain is not working right. What do I do? With people with dementia, they look at the slides and they're like, well, I feel sorry for that person, but that's not what's wrong with me. So they don't have that cognitive ability to make it meaningful for them. And so it gets complicated, because if it's somebody who's never had a lot of insight, if it's somebody who's never had a lot of personal responsibility, um, so you're telling me she doesn't have insight and she's not being personally responsible because she's got dementia. She's never had that. That's where the layers get really, really complicated. That's where you might want to set up a time with, or attend a support group and talk to it about people who've been through it. Set up a time with Dee Dee or Lisa or me, to kind of talk through those concerns and those issues. So we have 2 minutes left. We have talked about a lot of things. We've talked about when to tell and when not to tell. We've talked about some of the things that work, some things that don't work. I'm going to leave you, if there's no last minute question. I'm not really seeing anybody looking like they're trying to desperately unmute and say something. I'm going to leave you with um, what we kind of started with, which is communication is the connection. So when other things are getting harder and separating, this relationship and this communication is really what makes it work for us and for people living with dementia. So take a deep breath, let go of being right, be willing to kind of take in some new strategies, some new approaches. But you can only do that if you are in a flexible, adaptable state. And you can only do that if you're taking care of yourself. So for you to be able to be flexible with the parent with dementia, with the parent without dementia, because many times those care partners lose their ability to be flexible and adaptable because they're working so hard just to keep things going. They're working so hard just to keep the car on the road. That stopping to get an oil change just doesn't seem like it's worth the time and effort, but it is. So I want to thank y'all for being here. I want you to watch for, hopefully within the next week or so, you'll get an email from Lisa with some of the with the slides that I've referred to, and maybe a couple other things I might throw in as well, just for party favors. You'll get that, but do stay connected with Dementia Alliance, because um, it's people who get it. So thank you so much for being here, and have a great rest of your morning. Bye.